So this lesson is on solving quadratics using the square root method. Alright, so remember, whenever we talk about a quadratic, we're referring to something that's ax squared plus bx plus c equals basically some number. Alright, now the square root method, right, when we go to use this, we don't want a bx term. Okay, so we would just have ax squared plus c equals a number. Okay, so really quick to talk about this. If we wanted to simplify these expressions, right, we know 6 squared is 36. We know 9 squared is 81. We know negative 7 squared is 49. And we know negative 12 squared is 144. So when we break this down and look at it, if I gave you the equation x squared equals 81, and we know that the solution to an equation is the value of the variable that makes the equation true. Think of values of x that would make this true. A lot of you would say 9, right? But could negative 9 work? If I take negative 9 and square it, would that equal 81? And remember, a negative raised to an even power is a positive. Okay? So here, find those solutions to this equation. Well, you know x could equal 8 and x could equal negative 8. So that by definition of a square root, if a squared equals b, then the square root of b equals a. So in easier terms, if 3 squared equals 9, then the square root of 9 is 3. We use this concept to solve these quadratics using the square root method. Okay, so how do we solve these quadratics using the square root method? First off, you have to look for no bx, and that's the key part. Look for a quadratic with no bx term. Okay, so the first step is to basically isolate the x squared term. Once you isolate x squared, then you're basically going to take the square root of both sides. So remember, if I have x squared, the inverse operation of this is the square root. So if you take the square root of x squared, it just gives you x. And then basically we solve. Now one thing you have to keep in mind here is when we take the square root of both sides, right, when we solve, you're going to get x equals plus or minus the square root. So what this means, plus or minus, is the positive square root and the negative square root. Okay, let's take a look at some examples here. So the first one, I have x squared equals 121. What I do to both sides here to get rid of the exponent 2 is take the square root. The square root of x squared is x equals, if I'm taking the square root to solve an equation, I'm going to put plus or minus the square root of 121 is 11. This means positive 11 is the solution and negative 11 is the solution. So the next example, the first thing I have to do here is isolate the x squared term. So I have to get rid of the 7. How do I get rid of it? I subtract it. So I would get x squared equals 26. Now I can go ahead and take the square root of both sides. And when I do that, I get x squared equals plus or minus the square root of 26. Now, can the square root of 26 be simplified? No. So x equals the positive square root of 26 and the negative square root of 26. You can write your final answer as this or plus or minus square root of 26. So the next example. First thing I'm going to do here is isolate x squared by adding 9 to both sides. That gives me 8x squared equals 72. Then I'm going to divide both sides by 8, and I get x squared equals 72 divided by 8 is 9. To get rid of the exponent 2, square root both sides, and I get plus or minus the square root of 9, which is 3. So you can write your final answer like this, or you can break it off into x equals 3, and x equals -3. Okay, do me a favor and try the next two examples on your own, and then come back and check your answer. So the first one, I'm going to subtract 20 from both sides. I'm going to get x squared equals 36. Then I take the square root of both sides, and x equals plus or minus the square root of 36 is 6. Next one. First thing I'm going to do is add 40 to both sides. Right? That gives me 2x squared equals, that's going to be 99. Then I'm going to divide both sides by 2, and that will give me x squared equals 99 over 2. I'm going to go ahead, take the square root of both sides, and I get x equals the square root of 99 over the square root of 2. Now here's what I would do for this one, right? Simplify this to plus or minus the square root of 99 over 2, which I would break up into the square root of 99 over the square root of 2, and that would give you root 9 times root 11 all over root 2. But then remember, I have to rationalize this denominator. I'm going to multiply numerator and denominator by root 2. So x equals plus or minus 3 root 22 all over 2. And this would be your final answer. Okay? Generally, we would not have anything that difficult, but we do have to prepare for it. Okay, next one. I'm going to subtract 1 here. I get 10x squared equals 920. Then I'm going to divide by 10, and I get x squared equals 92. So now I take the square root of both sides, and I get x equals plus or minus the square root of 92. And that breaks up into the square root of 4 times the square root of 23. So our final answer here is x equals plus or minus the square root of 4 is 2 root 23. And we are done. Alright, the next two get a little more complicated. In the first example, to get n squared by itself, the first thing I have to do is get rid of the 9. I'm going to go ahead and add it to both sides. These cancel out and leave me with negative 2n squared equals negative 200. Now, remember, you have to understand is when you add 9, you're left with negative 2. That's why you got to divide by, bring down the negative 2. Then I'm going to divide both sides by negative 2. N squared equals positive 100. How do I get rid of the exponent 2? Take the square root. N equals plus or minus the square root of 100 is 10. Alright. The next one. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and get rid of this negative. Let's just make it positive 2/3 x. So the first thing we're going to do here is subtract 6. And that would give me 2/3 x squared equals 24 minus 6 is 18. Now, I'm basically going to go ahead. Anytime I want to get rid of a fraction, the first thing I do is multiply both sides by 3. That leaves me with 2x squared equals 54. Then I'm going to divide by 2, and I get x squared equals 27. How do I get rid of the exponent 2? I take the square root. So x is equal to plus or minus. I'm going to break this up into root 9 times root 3. So plus or minus 3 root 3. Alright. Now, here's the thing. When I subtract 2 in this first one, I get 4x squared equals negative 24. But when I divide by 4, I get x squared equals negative 6. anytime you get x squared equals a negative, right away it is a no solution. Because anytime you square a number, it will always, always, always be positive. So right away, as soon as you have x squared equals a negative, after you isolate the absolute or the x squared term, right away your answer is going to be no solution. All right, go ahead, work on the homework, and let me know if you have any questions.